Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have an awesome guest, someone I'd even call a friend, Eithan Haim, the brave whistleblower, dad, fighter to protect kids. What's up, man? How's it going?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. It's a privilege.
Yeah, I'm so stoked to have you on. You've just done so much good exposing some of the craziness, medical malpractice these days. And yeah, I'd love to hear your story before we get into all that and just hear how you grew up and how you kind of became who you are now.
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to you. I mean, it's I had like an average upbringing, right? I was like the most average kid from Florida. And so I grew up in a suburb outside of Orlando. I have a brother and a sister, two parents still together. And my dad's a doctor, so yeah, he was kind of the inspiration for me going into medicine. But, like I remember going around to like the mall or like supermarkets, and patients of my dad's would come up to him and be like, "Oh, Dr. Hahn, thank you for saving my life or saving my wife's life." And I remember thinking to myself, like, they would have this connection with my dad that was like something I've never had before, right? Even though he was my dad, it was like this special thing that he had with these people that like I had never seen before. And growing up, you know, uh, um, I initially went to college for music, but then I realized I didn't want to spend my life sleeping in a van. Yeah, I wasn't that talented, you know,
What'd
and
you play or what'd you do? I'm
the
curious.
guitar, yeah,
Nice.
and bass, and yeah, because I went with a buddy of mine who's actually like an internationally known DJ now. He's like a musical savant. He gets flown all over the world, and women get like tattoos of his signature on their body. Yeah,
That's
and
wild.
so he actually made it. Yeah, yeah. He's like a very famous DJ. And so we went to college originally together to music, but then I was like, it's not really for me. So then that's when I decided to do medicine. And I kind of always knew that that was like my calling, but like when I was younger, it was we would get into all different types of shenanigans and get into a whole bunch of trouble. And I think that kind of primed me for like getting into everything that happened the past couple of years.
Yeah, I grew up kind of a troublemaker too, and I think that sense of rebellion really helps a lot when it comes to standing up for things like this and just going against what's considered normal or the narrative or, the standard route to take.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we would in the 2000s, right when I was growing up, like when I was in high school and college, 2004, 2008 for high school, and then 2008, 2012, still like the age before social media. So you can still do things without having like this um, uh, permanently be branded, you know? Like if you made a mistake on the weekend, like people would forget it by Monday or Tuesday. And you would see people go through these phases where like they would be into one style or another in high school, but then after like a year or two they would come out of it because like that identity was just temporary. And I feel like that's something that has changed like between our upbringing and what's happening now, because like when you have these kids becoming part of like this transgender lifestyle, right? It becomes memorialized on the internet, and they get funneled into these pathways that are go from like these digital like screens to like the material world, because you have these forms you find online, like these transgender forms, like if you're 14, 15, 16 years old, but then they lead you to like actual people who will prescribe you hormones to do surgeries. This they call it like the rainbow family, the glitter family, that will like shower you with praise. And then you become plugged into this cult, and then you can never plug yourself out. And I don't know, I feel like that's kind of like one of the starkest things, like seeing the way I grew up and the way I think that's what's contributing to the way things are happening now. And like seeing all that happen, especially after 2020, it's like these kids are being put on this pipeline that they can never come back from.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, man. I feel super blessed to have kind of grown up in the last golden age before all the crazy technology, before the transgender madness, but there's got to be some way that,
I really
you know,
feel
we
it
could,
was the last golden age of it. I think it was the
we
last
had like
golden
an
age. Like,
all-American childhood in spite
yeah,
of any of the bad stuff. I feel like all-American childhood. And,
yeah,
but
it was
there's got to be
before all
some
the
way.
wokeness. Yeah, and I think that it's like they have to fight through it now, you know? And it's like the generations before us, they kind of had permitted everything to just go beyond, like everything to go one step farther than they should have. And it's because previous generations had allowed it, that's like up to people like us, you know, who kind of had everything to lose. You know, it's like we had no option because we had kids. You know, we were had young children. So like it was up to us to fight it. So like we were like the last generation who lived in that golden age before the madness. And like it kind of makes sense that we were the ones who had to kind of draw the line in the sand, you know, like you shall not pass, you know?
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Yeah.
If not you, who? If not now, when? But
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible, really, that because you were so brave in speaking up, and you did that. I mean, if I recall correctly, before you even had a kid. So
Yeah.
how did you find that within you, in spite of not even? Because I assume you feel the same, but I feel like when I had a kid, it opened up my heart to an amount of love I didn't even know I was capable of. It just transcended everything else cool in the world to me, and being the dad's like the best thing ever. So how did you
Yeah.
find that within you, just I guess observing, and why did you come to the conclusion that you had to speak out, and how did you get that courage? Because I'm sure it was very scary.
Yeah. And you know, for the people who may not know, I blew the whistle in May of 2023. I was an anonymous whistleblower that exposed Texas Children's Hospital, the largest children's hospital in the world, for lying about the existence of their transgender program. And after that, we can get into it, but they tried to send me to prison for 10 years. The case was finally dismissed in like, an epic showdown between me and this judge where he was trying to send me to jail, for violating a gag order. But yeah, I mean, when in May of 2023, I decided to blow the whistle in January of 2023 because earlier that year, well, in 2022, I had found out that the hospital I was working at, Texas Children's Hospital, while I was training as a general surgery resident, was lying about the existence of their transgender program. Where in March of 2022, they had said unequivocally, they had released a statement to a bunch of media outlets that they were shutting down their transgender program because of the quote potential legal criminal ramifications, right? And it makes sense because a few weeks before, the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, had issued an opinion saying that these interventions could constitute criminal child abuse. And in mid 2022, when I was finding out about all of this, because I only found out that the program even existed after the fact, after the statement in March of 2022, like my co-residents would come up to me and be like, hey, like, I just implanted this period blocking device in some 11-year-old girl who never wants to have children, who wants to have more surgery, who's positive that she's a boy, that wants to live her entire life this way, whose brothers and sisters are transgender, whose parents are transgender. And I remember thinking to myself, like, holy crap, this is child abuse. And I still didn't believe it. That was in like mid-May, mid 2022, right?
Did you say
And
it to
then,
any of them? Any of those other doctors that were doing it? Were you ever like, gosh, how did you feel about doing that? Or do you feel like that could be
yeah, yeah, yeah,
wrong?
yeah. We
Or too,
talked
or
about it and
just
they
like
were
they're too
shocked.
young?
We didn't believe it. We didn't believe that this was a program wide, hospital wide program. It was too crazy to believe. I didn't believe it for months, right? Until January of 2023, when the directors of the transgender program were giving a lecture at the hospital's most prestigious lecture series called Grand Rounds. It's like where the entire Department of Pediatrics, which for Texas Children's is the largest department of pediatrics in the world, they listen to a lecture being given by the transgender program, right? And they talk about their algorithmic approach to these interventions, from general pediatrics in like the primary care setting to the psychiatrists to the endocrinologists and then to the surgeons. So this was a multidisciplinary clinic. And if they were speaking at the Grand Rounds lecture, then this means this is a hospital-wide priority. And this is a hospital-wide priority, even though they didn't even have any online presence. And that's very important because every children's clinic at a big children's hospital like TCH has a website. So like families and parents can like book appointments. So it's kind of like this underground transgender clinic that they were hiding, right? So like the only people who knew about it were the ones in the know, like were the ones who like it was like a pipeline like within the hospital. Like there was no outward facing like uh uh indication that they existed. But the reason, back to your question, is like, I spent a lot of time working at TCH and we would operate on the sickest kids imaginable. Like I can't even I mean the number of kidney and liver transplants I did on little children where I would sew kidneys onto the aortas of like little baby kids, like little children.
Wow.
And um, you know, so because I like you have these kids with congenital diseases, and after you kind of get to know them, you realize that they're the most average kids imaginable. Like, even though they have this chronic disease that brings them into the hospital every single month with like one problem or another, and they're probably going to die in a hospital within like a couple of years, they're still the same as every other kid, right? They want to chase girls and ride bikes and play video games. And so even though they're born with this disease that they had no control over, we take them to the operating room to make them healthy again, right? To fix a problem. But then in the same operating rooms that we were fixing kids in, the surgeons from the transgender clinic were taking perfectly healthy children, right, who had no congenital disease and making them permanently sick by implanting these puberty blocking devices into their arms. So like you have these two populations, right? You have one that's born sick and they're probably going to die in a hospital before they turn 18. And then you have perfectly healthy children who are being made chronically sick because of the corruption of medicine. And it's like, because I would see these kids, and their suffering, like the ungodly suffering that they had to live through every single day, and that they were being torn from their lives they wanted to live. And then you contrast that with these kids who are being permanently shackled to the boundaries of a hospital because of the corruption in these doctors' minds. It's sick, man. And like I had just gotten married to my wife in August of 2022. So it's like if we're going to bring a kid into this world, then of course, like, I can't let something like this go un unknown, to like let it just fester beneath the surface is completely insane.
Yeah, I completely agree. And your wife's wonderful. I met her one time, and it's just so fantastic that you had the courage and the wherewithal to look at that, know it's wrong, and actually say something. I'm curious what that, if you're allowed to talk about it, what that process looks like. Even how does one become a whistleblower, and who do you whistleblow to,
Yeah,
and
no, it's
kind
a
of what
good
that
question.
means. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because
because hopefully
it's
more
like
people can do it. Because
yeah, it's
you
like a
know,
complete unknown. So it's like, um, it took us like a couple of months because it was me and my wife kind of making this decision together. And like how would we blow the whistle? What would we do? What or like the mechanics of it? So like we're just random people. I have no idea. I have no connections. I didn't even have social media. My wife didn't have social media. We didn't know anyone, right? So what we did is we would just send out emails to people in news organizations, like conservative news organizations. But even I sent it out for 5 months. Um, Most organizations didn't believe me when I told them the story. So like, I pretty much gave up by April of 2023. But then, I was working back at the hospital and um I saw what was going on. And then it was like, I just have to try again. And so I just kept on sending out emails and I would just keep on getting rejected. And then finally, Christopher Rufo, someone on his team reached back out to me and was like, hey, like we want to hear more of what's going on. So I got on a phone call with someone from Christopher Rufo's team. He's a investigative journalist, conservative journalist, and um, you know, we had gone through a vetting process for a couple of days, and I gave him all the documents, which were like de-identified hospital data. It's like the same information that's released to news organizations about infectious disease outbreaks. Like if there's a outbreak of like the flu, right? They're going to release like, this number of patients came in, with, this age range, So it's like it's none of it's HIPAA information. It's just de-identified hospital data. And I had, the lecture that was given in January 2023, but also a Zoom conference where it's like you have this huge clinic and it's all being concealed. So I had compiled all this documentation, and all of it was like de-identified, and I gave it to him, and uh, he broke it in a story on May 16th, 2023, and I was the anonymous whistleblower in that story.
Wow. Well, it's incredible that, Christopher Rufo had the guts to, believe you, take in the info, put it out there. And yeah, I didn't even know hospitals put information like that out, regarding the flu or anything really. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really common. So it's like when you have like the measles outbreak, how that was a story like
yeah.
a couple of weeks ago. So that was in the town over. Like it's like a couple like 10 minutes away from where I live outside of Dallas. And yeah, the hospital, they say, we had a 10-year-old child who got measles, right? We treated him. That's like de-identified hospital data. It's like, right? It's like part of information that doctors release as part of like their public health awareness. So it's like this is something, the biggest children's hospital in the world lying about a program that's sterilizing kids is definitely within the realm of, public health. And the good thing is that the Department of Justice finally agreed with that assessment, dismissed this case, over a year later.
Yeah, I'm super thankful they dismissed it. An absolute miracle. I'm curious what happened once you did the story with Christopher Rufo and he broke it. Did the hospital figure out it was you? Did people come after you? Did you get support? What
Yeah.
what kind of happened right afterwards?
Well, so right after I was still anonymous, so my life went on like normal, like nothing even happened. But the story blew up in the news, like it was all over the news. And it was crazy to see that, like the people I listened to, like the podcasts I listened to, like Jordan Peterson, Glenn Beck, Ted Cruz, Miranda Devine, like we're all like talking about this story, and it was like, oh man, like you know, but I want to stay anonymous, So the story came out on May 16th, and it was perfect timing because the day after, May 17th, the Texas Senate was voting on SB 14, which was the Texas bill that was banning these interventions on children. So they voted to pass the bill with bipartisan support. So within 24 hours of the story coming out, the conduct we exposed was voted to become illegal in the state of Texas, right? Partially because our story came out the day before. So like, I crossed the highest threshold for a whistleblower within 24 hours. And then on May 19th, right, 3 days after the story came out, the Attorney General of Texas had started an investigation into the hospital for lying about their transgender program solely because of Christopher Rufo in my report, like my anonymous whistleblower report. And then on May 23rd, another whistleblower spoke out. This was a nurse who worked in the clinic. And she actually came out later publicly, after I was indicted. But she had a firsthand account of what was going on behind closed doors and like the horror that she was seeing. And we didn't know each other at the time. She was completely independent, right? She just reached out to Chris Rufo in like an anonymous email too, and she told her story. And then on May 28th, I think, yeah, I think it was May 28th, the CEO of the hospital um, says he's going to shut down the program for the second time in like just over a year. So it's like it was the biggest win imaginable, right? It's like think about it, like I anonymously blew the whistle. a law gets passed a day after. An investigation gets started 3 days after. Almost a week after, another whistleblower speaks out, right? Like all this happens, and it's like, all right, well, I'm done. That's it. Like I'm just gonna move on with my life. That's, I did my part. Like time to move on. Because by that point, I had already had a job. My residency, my surgical training was just about to end in June. So a month later, in June 2023. And I had a job lined up in a small town outside of Dallas. My wife had just been hired as a federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice in the Northern District of Texas in Dallas. So we were like just going to move on with our lives. And then everything in my life changed on June 23rd, 2023. So a little bit over a month after the story came out. And it was the day of my graduation. It was a Friday. Um, it was like the early afternoon. And I was getting ready for the ceremony, right? This is one of the most important days of my life. Like you graduate from surgical training, like you've sacrificed so much for the past 5 years that the day you graduate is one of the biggest days ever. So my family was in town. I was just about to meet up with them. But then all of a sudden, I get this aggressive knock on my door, right? And I'm like, man, like, who the hell is that? And I shuffle over, I open the door, and standing outside are two armed agents with Health and Human Services. And they inform me that they're investigating a case regarding medical records. And like, I just completely freaked out in that moment where like it's like unbelievable, right? And it was the middle of the Biden regime. So remember, it's like this was the middle of the worst of everything, where the weaponization, the corruption, everything. So I knew the reason they were there. Like they were a primitive part of my brain knew exactly what was happening. But luckily, my wife, had just finished getting ready and she was able to, pull me aside and be like, hey, like, do not talk to them without an attorney present. So I tell them that they leave, but before they leave, they give me a target letter, which is a letter that informed me that I was being criminally investigated by the United States Department of Justice. And it was signed by one of the main characters in this story, an assistant U.S. attorney, Tina Ansari.
That's I can't imagine how scary it is to just have agents show up at your door armed. Lucky though that your wife's smart on the law side of things for sure.
Yeah. Well, and we were scared for sure, but then there was like a part of us that was like we were so angry by we knew that they came that day for a specific reason. Like they were using the value of my accomplishments as the means of their extortion, right? In order to get me to comply with their corrupt investigation. Like they were using the graduation as that end. And like that just pissed us off. So like what my wife and I did, we kind of freaked out for a little bit for like 45 minutes. But then we were like kind of filled with this like kind of hopeless defiance where both of us are non-smokers, but I went out and I bought a pack of cigarettes and we chain smoked a pack of cigarettes and drank like 2 bottles of champagne and listened to like Vietnam War music. And then we planned our war strategy. We were like, man, F these people, like we're gonna fight back. And then we went to my graduation later that night and just celebrated. And when it was my time to like be recognized, my wife just started crying and left the table and people thought it was because, they were saying such nice things about me. But my wife knew, she was the only one that knew that agents had showed up to my home like a few hours before.
That's epic that you guys still made it, celebrated, came up with your war plan. What's Vietnam War music like? CCR or something?
Yeah, like
What is that?
CCR, Jimi
Yeah.
Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan,
Nice.
Muse, like Limp Bizkit, a little Slipknot. My wife kind of hates it, but like, like
Yeah, yeah.
Iowa, like Slipknot's Iowa, you know.
Yeah, that's sick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like The Blister Exists, it's one of their great
Yeah.
songs. Um, yeah. It was
That's
like a
cool,
lot
man.
of those days were like a lot of heavy metal, you know.
Yeah, and that helped you get through it, and you'd have to battle on for quite a long time, right? How
Yeah.
long did
Yeah.
this prosecution, unjust prosecution, in my opinion, go on for, and how did it end up ending? And I don't know, what'd you learn in between along the way? Must
Yeah,
be a
well, for
lot.
the next 6 months, from June 2023 to January of 2024, I was anonymous because it was still the investigation phase, right? Where they had not charged me with a crime yet, so they're just investigating me. So I got in touch with these really great attorneys who were willing to represent me, and they had reached out to Tina Ansari, the prosecutor, and within like a week. And then, she had delayed the meeting for a couple of weeks, but they finally got in touch with Tina Ansari in July, a month later, after the agents came to my home. And it was on that call that we kind of found out like what we were in for. Because on that call, we found out that Tina Ansari was a raging lunatic, but also a radical ideologue, because she had, admitted to my attorneys that she had never reviewed the evidence before sending agents to my home. Like she had no idea what she was investigating. So it was just
Why would
totally
someone
insane.
send agents without knowing a reason?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, no, that there's no good reason. It's insane, man. It's crazy. And we know how crazy that is because my wife's a prosecutor, right?
Right.
But, so she didn't do enough evidence or enough research to find out what she was investigating. But she did enough research to find out my wife had just been hired by the Department of Justice for the same position as Tina Ansari, but in a different district. And she used that to threaten her. She said, my wife, Andrea, is not going to have any problems with her background check unless, quote, she continues to become difficult. And what she was referring to was my wife advising me to not speak with the agents. She was insinuating that my wife was obstructing an investigation by advising me to like exert my constitutional rights to have an attorney present. So like, after the phone call, my wife and I look at each other like, are we just being extorted by a federal prosecutor? Like, yeah, we are. Like, this is crazy. And my attorneys had outlined all the details of this and sent it to Congress. So this isn't like letters. So this is like not me just saying this, is my attorneys saying this to like Chip Roy and Jim Jordan in like the weaponization committee. So it's all public record. And then over the next 6 months, like Tina Ansari was pulling out the big guns because they had leaked my name to activists in the transgender clinic at TCH who began defaming me online, right? Accusing me of mutilating patients, accusing me of sexually abusing patients in clinic rooms. And we know that it was someone in the TCH transgender clinic because that person admitted it to an FBI agent. And we got that in discovery, like after they brought a case against me. So we know who it is. Um, and they also had gotten a search warrant and had hacked into my email, my text messages, my phone, right? So they had records of everything. They were listening to everything I was doing, you know?
So crazy.
And then over the next couple of months, my attorneys have more phone calls with Tina Ansari, and we find out how much of a lunatic this lady is. She tells my attorneys that she's in contact with the families, with the transgender families, and that they're the victims and the doctors are the victims, and that they're going to sue me if I avoid criminal charges, which they did. They did sue me, right, with the help of the Human Rights Campaign, and so that was a legitimate threat.
And what happened with that lawsuit?
Oh, it was total BS. We just ignored it because it was nothing. It was an intimidation strategy. And
Okay.
then, but the one thing when I was still anonymous too is that Tina Ansari told my attorneys that she was going to take me to a jury trial, even if she was going to lose, right? Even if on a technicality. And uh, and after she said that, I heard like the change in my attorneys, their voices, right? I could sense their fear for the first time ever in 6 months. And it was like, man, they were scared, not for themselves, but for me, because they knew that we were dealing with an attorney, like a prosecutor, Tina Ansari, that was totally unhinged, that was completely insane, right? And like my wife and I had to make a decision. Like, do we stay anonymous? Do we let them destroy us? Because that's what they were going to do. because by that point we had already spent $300,000, everything we ever had to our names, our entire savings, because we weren't like big spenders, but like that was what we were planning on saving for a home for our kid's college fund, but all that was gone in attorney's fees, you know? So it's like we had to make the decision in January 2024, like I have to take this story public even before charges were brought, because if Tina Ansari is going to destroy my life, I might as well get ready for it. I might as well get ready for a trial. So it was like, man, that was the scariest day of my life taking that story public. I think I had a panic attack because I had an interview with Ben Shapiro, and he's like a very fast talker, and I thought I screwed it up, and it wasn't like my best interview, but I like puked right after. And I think that was a panic attack. But so after that, my identity is public, and then I tell the story, and then like in one sense, like this entire weight was lifted off my shoulders because the truth about what was happening was put out there. But in another sense, we were put into purgatory because the line of communication with Tina Ansari went completely silent. And then for the next 6 months, from January 2024 to June of 2024, like I had no idea. Like every single day, I was waiting for like an armada of federal agents to be around every single corner. Like every morning, I would wake up expecting to see agents like outside my house. And like every single second of every day, like that pressure gets greater and greater because we knew that, like, I believed that she was going to bring charges. It was just a matter of time. And it was in uh, June 2024, so a year after they first came to my home, that at 7 a.m., uh, three heavily armed U.S. Marshals showed up to my home like I was some type of drug dealer, like I murdered someone. And it was that day that I was informed I was being charged with 4 HIPAA-based felonies, and I was facing up to 10 years in prison.
4 years in prison for telling the truth. I mean,
10
10
years in
years in
prison.
prison for,
Yeah.
yeah, that's just, it's mind blowing to even conceive. How does it, you're talking about this, a prosecutor, like, does someone even care so much and so viciously attack somebody who's just doing the right thing? What do you think motivates people like her or people that really go hard on this crazy transgender stuff? Because I think it's like a 90% at least of Americans know it's just wrong and it's insane, even in California.
Yeah. So it's a really good question. What motivates her? What motivated Tina Ansari? I think there's 2 parts to it. And I think that's a big part of the story. What motivated Tina Ansari to do something so crazy? Because and I'll answer that question at kind of as the indictment plays out, as the criminal prosecution now, because initially
Yeah.
from June 2023 to June 2024, it was just investigation. But once they showed up to my home and gave me an indictment, that was the prosecution phase, right? Where like, ooh, no, this is serious. Like, I'm facing 10 years in prison. I have to go in front of a judge with a bunch of other prisoners in shackles who are like rapists, murderers, alleged, that's what they were being accused of. And I had to plead not guilty along with them. Um, so, uh,
Can I
the
pause you there
first,
and ask something?
yeah,
Well, you mentioned like some of the crimes. You mentioned earlier how people had made up false accusations against you at the hospital and nothing came to fruition. But that's something that happens a lot these days in general. I mean, you can look at things, I'll just say in my opinion, like the Johnny Depp thing or the Brett Kavanaugh, my case, a lot of people in family court, it's very common for people to make up very like horrible false accusations. And I just can't help but wonder if we can't have some sort of penalty for doing that because right now there's none and it just seems like such a terrible thing. I mean, it destroys people's lives.
yeah, and there was. So this was per se defamation, which is a legal uh um threshold. So it's like defamation absolutely because what this person did is they had accused me of an actual crime of sexually abusing patients. And this person knew it was a lie. They knew what they were writing was done maliciously. right? And the person admitted it to an FBI agent, so we knew it was that person. The problem is the statute of limitations in Texas is 1 year, so it's already passed. So by the time I found out, like, in June, you know, July, July, August, September, October, November of 2024, the review was written like, in like July, August of 2023. So, and the information was under seal. It's still under seal, right? So if I say who this person is, like, the judge could put me in jail, you know? So like the first thing that has to happen is the evidence has to be unsealed. So it's like the legal quandary of it, you know? So
Maybe
yeah,
extending the
no, there
statute of
is.
limitations would be a good start.
Yeah, I think that maybe not even that. It's just, I mean, in this case, I'm just kind of screwed. There's nothing to do about it anymore, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't mean just you specifically. I just mean in general. It's just crazy how often it happens. I think
Yeah.
with the internet, social media takes off like wildfire, things that, aren't true and really make someone out to be somebody they're not. It's just
Yeah,
something
well,
that I
what
find
has
to
to
be a
happen is
tragedy.
that if the evidence is unsealed, then people can see who this person is, right? And like this person's still working at TCH, you know? Like for
Yeah.
them to do something so vicious, I mean, that's something that the Texas Medical Board can address, right? And maybe not like take away this person's license, but they should be reprimanded, right? Um, but you know, and especially like the DOJ's first indictment, it did the same thing, right? It had manufactured a huge lie against me. The entire first indictment, like what they wrote in their criminal charges against me, all of it was false, but it made me look like a criminal. It said I had no reason to be a TCH, right? I was not taking care of patients there. I was not operating there, that I had disclosed patient information, identifiable HIPAA-based information, right? None of that was true, right? And it only took my attorneys a few weeks to expose that everything the DOJ said in their indictment was false, right? And it's we were able to show that the DOJ's own evidence, the evidence they gave us in discovery, proved everything in their indictment was false. And that's worth like restating. All of the DOJ's own evidence proved me innocent, but they still charged me with a crime, which means number one, they either never looked at their evidence or they ignored their evidence and thought that if they could bring 10 years of prison in front of me, then I would be too scared and I would plead to something. Obviously, they thought incorrectly, right?
Yeah.
But so their first indictment falls apart in September and October of 2024. And they come back and charge me with the same crimes, which is crazy because
On a different
that,
indictment. Is that what you're
a
saying?
second indictment. Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, too, a few weeks before that, in September of 2024, we find out that Tina Ansari is practicing with a suspended bar license, which is like a really
Very
big deal. It's a
interesting.
felony in Texas. Yeah, it's like a huge deal. Like she's practicing law without a license, which makes every single thing she wrote completely moot, right? So they bring a second indictment with the same charges, but no new evidence, right? But they make a couple of important changes, and this goes to your original question about motivation, right? So Tina Ansari in the second indictment changes a few key things. So one of the most important legally, operationally significant words in HIPAA is disclose, right? You disclose. That's like murder. You kill someone, right? Like in HIPAA, it's disclose. They took disclose out of the indictment because they knew they couldn't prove it, right? They changed it to the word use. The problem with the word use is that it's not in the criminal statute. It's not a crime. Like they charged me with a non-existent crime. To use this information is not right. That's not even a legally actionable thing. And but then the most important thing is they changed the victims in the indictment from TCH as patients, right? Patients, that makes sense. It's HIPAA, right? HIPAA is meant
Yeah.
to protect patients. But they change it in the indictment in the second one to TCH in its physicians, Baylor College of Medicine. So that's significant. It's the first time in American history that HIPAA is not being used to protect patient privacy, but multi-billion-dollar hospital systems and the doctors who were caught lying to the public about a program that was sterilizing healthy young children. And this goes back to the motivation part, because remember earlier I said that Tina Ansari had told my attorneys that she thought the transgender kids and the doctors were the victims, right? The doctors were the victims. So that's significant because she changed the indictment to now the doctors in the hospital were the victims of HIPAA, right? That's very odd. And I thought to myself, man, like this case is totally descending into madness, right? Like, how is this possible? And uh, so I started delving into it. Who is this prosecutor, Tina Ansari? Like, what's her motivation? It can't just be ideology. Like, this is too insane. She's reinventing HIPAA law, right? This is blatantly unconstitutional. This is blatantly illegal, what she's doing. And so what I found out is that, yeah, maybe like I thought maybe there's conflicts of interest. Like maybe there's a financial side to it. Maybe she has some financial interest in TCH and Baylor College of Medicine, right? The victims in her indictment. And what do you know? That's exactly what I found out, right?
Really?
So, yeah. So, right after Tina Ansari sent agents to my home, her brother, who owns one of the biggest coffee companies, like private label coffee companies in the country, he has a bunch of business in the Texas Medical Center, which is where Texas Children's is. He has business with hospitals like within the TCH Baylor College of Medicine academic consortium, right? So right after she sent agents to my home, um, he started attending major fundraisers with TCH's president, Debbie Sukin, like 2 months after, like where they raised like over $500,000 in one night. So
Wow.
right after she sends agents to my home, going after like, me as a TCH whistleblower, her brother who has business, with hospitals connected to TCH, right, starts going to fundraisers, right? But then also her aunt was known as a major TCH and Baylor College of Medicine fundraiser for years. She's a prominent Democrat in Houston. She ran against Dan Crenshaw. And then her uncle was on the board of TCH. And then her aunt, right, the big time Democrat, was appointed to a board of one of the hospitals that is connected to TCH and Baylor College of Medicine, Harris Health. This is the same hospital system that approves the contracts with Tina's brother's coffee company. And she's appointed at the same time as TCH's vice president and general counsel, someone by the name of Afshin Davis, who was at the very first meeting 4 days before agents were sent to my home. And that's only like a very beginning part. So this is like Tammany Hall level corruption. This is like Sierra Leone level corruption. And like, you know,
It sounds crazy. Are any of those legally big enough reason to for have to
yeah,
step down as the
yeah.
prosecutor?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So we I told this to my attorneys, and like I was the one who uncovered this. So I reported on it in a story with Fox News, Kendall Teets. So you know, like all this is public, right? It's not just like it sounds totally insane, but the web of corruption is laid out in an article on Fox News. And so we uncovered that. I uncovered that in like November of 2024. She stepped down from the case like a week after.
Oh wow. Okay. But
Yeah.
someone else decided to keep going, correct?
Yeah. But by this point, it's like you would think that no, like they can't. This was after the election, after Donald Trump's election. Like they can't possibly continue on, but they do. And the new prosecutor, her name is Jessica Feinstein. And I would say one of the most evil people in this entire story because she's competent. She's like very, very smart, very competent. But it's like the capacity for these people to spend so much time and energy to send an innocent person to prison, like is unimaginable because that's what they're doing, right? Sending an innocent
Yeah.
person to prison. They knew I was innocent, but they want to send me to prison anyway. So
Did you ever get a
she
chance
gets
to talk to either one of those two
No,
prosecutors just one
no,
on
of
one and be
course
like,
not.
why are you trying to ruin my life? Like I'm just a dude.
No,
No, yeah.
yeah, I know what they
Okay.
would say. I know what they would say,
What?
but
What would they say?
oh, they're just doing their job, right? It's like the
Okay.
banality of evil, right? It's like the people who like send Jews into gas chambers. Ah, I was just doing my job. Like the Soviet prison guards, who were overseeing, their countrymen in gulags, right? They were just doing their
Yeah.
jobs, right? The Soviet
Just like all the
prosecutors just,
doctors right now that are doing gender
yeah,
affirming
they're
care are
just
just
doing their job.
doing their jobs.
Yeah. And then and then so Jessica Feinstein gets a third indictment on, I think it was November 20th, 2024. And but she also did the most vicious thing possible, which is she filed a motion for a gag order the same day. Because by that point, I was just like I was heavily, heavily criticizing the government. The only way I was able to get support to pay for a legal defense was by speaking out, right? That was the only way I was able to pay for a legal defense. And I raised like over $1.3 million. But like
That's
um uh
remarkable.
but like this is a $4 or $5 million case. My attorneys were able to have it just over $2 million. So we still owe like $500,000 in legal bills. But it was only because I was able to speak out that any of this was that was I was able to succeed in doing any of that, to pay for lawyers. And the argument the DOJ was making was that they were worried about cyberbullying. That was their argument, right? And that I
Of
can
who?
influence a
The
jury.
hospital?
No, no, of them. Prosecutors who
Of themselves.
prosecute murderers and cartels are worried about an average sized Jewish guy with like 15,000 followers on X. How is that possible? I've never been recognized publicly, right? How can I possibly influence one of the biggest juries in the entire United States, right? So
Yeah.
like what they were doing was blatantly unconstitutional, and we thought, man, there's no way the judge is gonna buy into it. No way. But Judge Hittner, who's like the arch villain of this entire case, on a hearing on December 3rd in person, right? He um he eats up this story like he eats up the DOJ's case like you know like he had never heard of an American citizen criticizing the government. Like he was some English aristocrat, right? And I was some type of peasant. And he was like he was clutching his pearls like I it was just so shameful to see an American judge, right, debase himself so completely and have such a disregard for the First Amendment that and what he did was the most vicious thing possible, because he didn't grant the gag order, right? Because he didn't grant it because he knew he would become the biggest laughing stock in the legal world. Because like to
Okay.
gag someone like me is crazy, right? People would laugh at him. But he didn't deny the order, right? Because he wanted to silence me. Because by that point, the fact that this case was being brought, you know, was being moved forward, it made him look bad as a judge. Like, how is this possible? Like, what's the judge doing? Right? The judge was playing his role in it. And so he just issued it as an open threat. He kept it open. And he said, I'm going to send you to jail if you continue, quote unquote, similar conduct. But without defining similar conduct, I can't know what I can or cannot say. So if I violate this rule that has no boundaries, then I'm going to jail, right? I have nothing to appeal because there's no order. And I couldn't do it anyway because I was $1 million in debt by that point, right? Like, so by that moment, like, that it was like each thing was like concrete block being tied to my leg and I was treading water, right? And I was just treading water. And then, but that was the last thing that just like sunk me, like that took me to like the absolute depths of like the entire thing. I think I talked to you a couple times during that time where I said I was gagged. And those were like the darkest days of my entire life, where every single second of every single day was just like this blackness. Like I had been consumed by a world of darkness, of hate, of anger, and think to myself, like, man, like why me? Like I did the right thing, and they're going to take me to a trial, and this judge, like I had no chance in trial with this judge because he's corrupt, right? He has no respect for the American legal system, you know, and
Sounds just so
so
evil, dude.
Yeah, exactly. The people who swore an oath to uphold the rights of defendants were the ones who were trampling all over it, right? So like the judge gets what he wants because, you know, the DOJ gets what they want, but all that comes at the cost of my rights, right? Like, which is not granted by the government, it's granted by God, which is inalienable. And that's something they swore an oath to uphold. But that's what they were destroying, right? And so every day goes by, man, and it's just like the frustration is building up. But then I thought about like all the people who were like standing behind me. It's like I felt like I was failing them because like they had believed in me because I was fighting, and then like at that moment I was like silencing myself because I was scared of going to jail. And it was like the shame of that was huge. I felt awful about that. And then like every day like I kind of come to this realization that like no, like all right, maybe jail or maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing in the world is living with the shame of not fighting back. So as the days went on, I knew that something was going to happen, that like there was going to be like an ultimate fight between me and the judge. And that ultimately came on January 22nd, 2025. So this was 2 days after Trump got inaugurated, because on the first day of his inauguration on January 20th, he had signed an executive order ending the weaponization of the DOJ. So what that meant for me is that my case should have been dropped January 21st. But behind the scenes, what happens is that the DOJ escalating the case towards trial on the 21st. That's what my attorneys are telling me, that they're ramping up for trial. And I'm like, no, like enough is enough. Like the line in the sand had been crossed. And like my wife and our baby had been born at that point because our baby was born in September of the year before, right? In the middle of the whole prosecution. And we thought like, nope, like there's no argument our lawyers can make that can possibly like there's no fair trial on the horizon. So if the judge was going to send me to jail, he would have to do it in front of the entire country. So on January
You were
22nd,
prepared for that.
yeah,
Just want to be
yeah,
clear with this is something that's important to me. You were going to stand on your convictions even if you sat in jail for years.
yeah. Oh yeah. By that point, absolutely.
That,
By
that
that
says
point,
a
I
lot,
was
man.
ready, and I was ready to go to jail like that day, right? Like it was something I had to accept as a fact, and my wife had to accept it, and it was just going to be, and would probably lose my entire profession and everything. But that's what would have to be the outcome, because I was not taking any more of their bullshit, right?
I mean,
So
that's courage, that's love, that's selflessness. I mean, I just respect it so much, dude. Gives me
yeah,
chills
and
even when
yeah,
thinking about
and
it.
so on January 22nd, I spoke out. My wife and I spoke out because my wife was speaking out by that point because of the gag order. So we had called out the DOJ on X. We had called out the acting U.S. attorney in charge of the Southern District, and this is the person. Like it takes like a year for the person to get confirmed by Trump's nominee for the Southern District of Texas. It takes a long time. So the person who's acting is still like the Biden lackey, right? So we call out the DOJ, the acting U.S. attorney Jennifer Lowry. Most importantly, I call out Judge Hittner, and I say he's running a kangaroo court, right? And he's corrupt, and of course he does not like that. And uh, we get an idea of how much he doesn't like that the next day on January 23rd, because I knew he was pissed, but I didn't know how pissed he was. Because on the evening of January 23rd, my attorneys tell me that um, Judge Hittner is going to send me to jail the next day. He's going to issue a warrant for my arrest for violating his de facto gag order, like a gag order he never even signed. But he's also going to move up my trial a month early to that Monday, which would eliminate any chance of having a fair trial, right? So it's like,
Yeah, I would think they couldn't even do that because your attorneys wouldn't be prepared. It doesn't make sense.
no, they can't do that. I mean, that's unconstitutional. That's illegal. You can't do that. That's what they do in like Sierra Leone or the Congo or like, or in China. That's what they do, right? But this is the United States of America. This is Houston, and this is the Southern District of Texas. And then the only out for me, they were
Which all of
offering
that,
me
I
an
mean,
out.
just that fact, Texas, like you weren't in
Yeah,
California. Like
yeah, no, no.
everyone in
So
red states should
but they
consider
were,
this too.
but this was part of an extortion, right? They were offering me an out. All I had to do was sign something called a pretrial diversion, right? And but what were the conditions of this pretrial diversion? I could never sue the government. I could never criticize the government. I could never criticize TCH or Baylor College of Medicine, the institutions that were lying about the program that was sterilizing kids. But also, no one in my family could criticize the government or criticize TCH or Baylor College of Medicine, right? And so if I sign that agreement, right, then Judge Hittner, right, then he wouldn't send me to jail. So that's what they were putting in front of me.
But the
And
normal
like,
prosecution's still happening. That's just to do with the gag order, fake gag order.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then he would dismiss my case the next day,
Oh, he
right?
would dismiss all of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it would be under the conditions that I could never criticize the government, right? Which is totally insane. So they were
Yeah,
extorting
totally.
conditions out of me that I would never have signed on to otherwise. And in the meantime, too, and I ended up signing that agreement because the next day I had to operate on patients. And plus, that agreement I was going to throw into the trash that Monday because it was being signed under duress, right? I was going to
You want to
violate that
clear a
agreement.
First Amendment violation.
Well, yeah, yeah. And, it's like if you hold a gun to someone's head and say, sign this contract, you're not bound by the conditions of that contract because it's under duress.
Okay.
Me signing this agreement was under duress. So, like, whatever the government said about me not suing the government or anything like that was total garbage, right? I was going to violate it and there's nothing they can do because it was under duress. So, like, I definitely didn't want to go to trial on Monday because I knew it would be in Hittner's court, right? I wouldn't get a fair trial. So I would be convicted, right? Because what the judge is able to do is not allow me a defense because he's the gatekeeper of what evidence can be brought into and left out of trial. So I knew if I were to go into Hittner's court that Monday, I was screwed. And he knew that too. That's why he was extorting this agreement out of me. But at the same time, too, that evening on January 23rd, my attorneys, I was lobbying. I mean, I was like texting every single person I knew who I thought had connections with DC, saying, this crazy judge is going to send me to jail tomorrow, right? Unless main justice in DC, the most powerful people in the world who are just on the heels of the greatest political revolution, the busiest people in the world, right? These people have to issue guidance to Houston and say, you guys have to dismiss this case with prejudice tomorrow. So it was like this race against time. And like on the one hand, I signed this agreement because I did not I want to do anything possible to stay out of Hittner's court that Monday because I knew I would be convicted. Because the judge, yeah, he was compromised at that point. But we had this like wild like gambit, like maybe if main justice in DC issues guidance the next morning by 9:30, maybe we can get this case dismissed under different conditions. And it's like I still thought I was going to jail the next day on January 24th because like yeah, like I signed this agreement, but who knows if the judge is actually going to agree with it. The guy's totally unhinged. He's a crazy person. The guy's super old,
Yeah.
right? He's like was appointed by Grover Cleveland, like
I,
it's that. I mean, that's a joke. He was actually
yeah.
appointed by Ronald Reagan, but you wouldn't it wouldn't be surprising to find out he was appointed by Grover Cleveland because that's how old he is. Um that's a joke. I know he'd be too old for that. But so the judge was losing it, right? The DOJ was losing it, and the only chance I had was this Hail Mary to main justice in DC. And Friday comes around the next day, and I go and I operate on my patients, and I'm like, man, like I still think I'm going to be arrested, like in the hospital. And I make it through my cases. I go home, and I'm still like kind of like on edge. My wife and I are on edge. And then uh, I'm on the phone with like a reporter from the Daily Wire because people are starting to hear about what's going on. Because I was on the phone with Josh Hawley's people, a bunch of different people. We were breaking in the news like this crazy judge is trying to send me to jail. Like I need some help quick, right? And like later that day, like maybe around like 1 or 2 o'clock, while I'm on the phone with a Daily Wire reporter, my wife screams, and I'm like, oh shit, you know, like it's either the police or, like, or something good happened. And then she comes into our bedroom where I'm talking, and I see her smiling, and she's holding our baby. And then she says, the judge just signed the order. Your case is dismissed with prejudice. They can never bring it again. And I was like, oh my God, it's like I entered this game of chicken with the judge, with the federal government, with the most powerful federal leviathan in human history. And like I just I stood up to him and I was like, no, like you cross this line, like you shall not pass. It's like where I'm
Yeah.
not going any inch forward. Like if you're gonna send me to jail, you send me to jail, man. But you're gonna have to do it in front of everyone. But he backed down and he signed the dismissal with prejudice. So it was like the last kick in the nuts before I exited this guy's courtroom. So, it's like the same day I thought I was going to jail was the day that the judge dismissed my case with prejudice, and it was never to be brought again.
It's so amazing. I remember texting you and how I feel even with you just telling the story. Just let's go. Like we're playing football
Yeah.
or something. Like, let's go. Like, it's
Yeah,
just
and
so
that
epic.
Sunday was when I was invited to the State of the Union, by Josh Hawley. So it was
Which,
like this sequence of
which is so
events.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a sequence of events that's unreal, man. Unreal. Like totally,
And who
it's
who
stranger than
applied
fiction.
this pressure, or how do you even
It
know
was
how that
it was a
judge ended
million
up
people. It
dismissing
was
it?
so many people. Josh Hawley
Okay, from
definitely played a
DC.
role. And
Yeah.
like I don't there was a million stories. And I don't know how it happened, but apparently, and I would say my attorneys are like, they're not my attorneys, they're like guardian angels. Marcella Burke, Jeff Hall, Mark Lytle, Ryan Patrick, and my wife, and I mean she's kind of my attorney because she was working at the Department of Justice at the time, like 9 months
Yeah.
pregnant, and but they were the ones who this was a win for them because they had overcome the impossible. And like it was it was all but it was like when I told you like I if she was going to destroy me, like when I took my story public in January 2024, like I knew I had to build an army because I had to fight back. Like that was the army, that like just people I told the story to. It's like I needed help in that moment, and like people came through. But like a lot of people came through in ways that like I still to this day I don't know how. Like a million people came through, and like it wasn't just a win for me, it was a win for everyone. Like a win for like our country, for the average person, that like if you stand up to the Leviathan and like like yeah, you're going to sacrifice a lot. You might go to prison, you're going to lose every dollar you've ever had, you're going to get famed, people are going to try to kill you, and like, but if you stand up and you say like no, no, like I'm not moving one single inch, that you will win. Like absolutely. Even if they send you to prison,
Yeah.
even if you die, you still will win.
It seems divine serendipity. It's
Yeah.
spectacular that you guys were
Yeah.
able to pull that off. I'm so grateful,
Yeah,
that you
it's
had that
divine
courage.
intervention. It's like when
Yeah.
you abide by God's laws of his commandments, by his uh uh then he will reward the believers and punish his enemies. And there's going to be hard times. It's going to seem like God is not with you, but you have to believe, right? And
Yeah.
it's not just like, man, it doesn't work unless you believe because,
Yeah.
like, right? It's like we had a lot of losses. Like the entire 2 years before was loss after loss. One thing would get worse, and then another thing would get worse. And then when we didn't think it could get worse, then it got worse. And then when we think it couldn't get worse after that, it only got worse. And then
Yeah.
even when it hit the absolute rock bottom, then it only got worse. Like when we thought we were in Dante's seventh, floor of his hell, we found out there was a ninth floor, you know, and like, but
Yeah.
like, we made it through, but every single floor of the corruption, we believed. We believed in doing the right thing. And because we did, we were rewarded for it. And like the most spectacular thing that is not just for me, but for everyone who is a part of it, like you included, this is like a victory for all of us that like we can look back on and be like, I was there. Like we were a part of
Yeah.
something great, you know?
Totally. I mean, it just shares striking similarities to what I went through, going
Yeah.
through the depths of hell, but never giving up, just always having that hope, that belief, and then pulling through. And it seems like a miracle when you finally,
Yeah.
triumph.
And
And it
then when
just,
you make it through to the other side, you look back and you're like, man, if I knew everything I would have had to go through, like I don't think I could have done it. Like it's like the ignorance of you have to be ignorant of the evil you're facing because that's the only way to get through it. If you were to
yeah,
see the entire beast that you would be facing, you wouldn't. I mean,
it would just look insurmountable. Yeah,
insurmountable. Like
yeah.
you have to be ignorant. You it sounds crazy, but you have to be. You have to
I
be
am. I'm
like
the hopeless optimist, Mr. Brightside. I
yeah,
totally am
yeah,
like
and
that.
it's like these kids like us who are like these like the kind of troublemakers,
Yeah.
whatever, like you know
Never tell me the odds, Han Solo. Let's go.
yeah, yeah, but we grew up on those stories. Like
Yeah.
we were animated by the stories of like these ancient stories of like the small guy overcoming like Frodo and Sam, you know.
Exactly.
Eh,
I
yeah,
wanted to
like
say
Luke
that
Skywalker and
because you
Hans.
keep exactly when you keep saying, you shall not pass, which is epic. And what this makes me think of, and it's something I listen to so much. You just said Frodo and Sam that I actually put this as like a song on my phone even. And it's like all the great stories, Aton, full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those are the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. And I think,
Yeah,
Eitan, I do understand now. It's because the folks in those stories didn't stop going when they had all these chances to turn it back, because
yeah,
they were fighting
yeah,
for something, and we're fighting for
yeah,
something. And it's something like that speech, Frodo Sam dynamic. It's true. We're going through all this darkness, all these children being harmed, you being prosecuted, parents losing their kids, but we are gonna win, and
yeah,
the sun is gonna shine, and good will
yeah.
beat this evil.
And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the sun will shine, but like you have to understand it's like that might be from prison.
Yeah,
It might be from death. And it's like that's a possibility, but like once you accept that and you understand that like yes, like if we believe in these things, if we believe in God and in a higher power, then like there is something material beyond our world that like we are bound by a higher power, and that even if we are dead in this life that there will be sunshine in something that we don't quite understand yet. And like it's like yeah, like things get really dark, but they get really really dark, but it's like that's part of it. It's like the darkness is it, that is, that's is
totally.
what the story is. And both of us lived it, man. It's like you went through it, like and and yeah, it's there's a lot of wisdom to be had in that because like with like the Lord of the Rings story, it's like, but that's the story of everything, you know.
It is.
It's like the story of human nature, of good and evil, of like facing insurmountable odds, like the mountain of doom, right? Like,
Yep.
the all-seeing eye, right? The little ghost things on the horses, I forget what they're
Yeah.
called.
It's exactly like that, though. It's just that's why that's such an impactful story.
Yeah. Yeah, and like a perennial story, something that it's like no matter what age in human history, if you tell that story humans will identify with it. It's like the story of the Bible, right? The Old Testament, the New
Yeah.
Testament. It's like the story of human will in the overcoming. It's like a story that's embedded into something that's deeper than our DNA. It's like it's like the presupposition of our DNA, because it's like the immaterial world that binds everything together. It's like the way we know something's good and something's bad. It's like the way we know these stories are true. Yeah, they might be fantasy, but shit, man, we just lived it, you know?
Yeah, they're truer than true,
Yeah,
if
stranger
anything.
than fiction. Yeah, because fiction
Yeah.
has to be written by someone who's like of logical mind, but reality has no boundaries, because like when you separate like, human conduct from ration or morality, then there's no author of how crazy things can get. And like that's the story of human history.
Yeah, and I would argue even that if you showed the founders or people back in the day the Lord of the Rings stories with dragons, every orcs, everything included, and us mutilating, chopping off healthy body parts off of kids, they would probably choose the Lord of the Rings one to be more likely to be true.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how dark and crazy it has gotten, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and
evil
and
to hurt these kids.
it's like in like when I'm reading a book right now about this guy named Walter Rosenberg, and he escaped from Auschwitz, right? He was a Slovakian Jew, he was 19 years old, and he was the first Jew
Wow.
to escape from Auschwitz. And the reason he wanted he was compelled to escape is because of the number of people that were being killed, and the Hungarian deportation was like on the horizon. So he knew he had to escape to alert the Jews of Hungary in order to like, because the entire Holocaust was based on deception, right? Because they were being told, oh, you're being relocated, you're going to work camps. So like they didn't know that they were going into gas chambers. So
Yeah.
like
You're just
if
becoming
they
who you really are.
yeah, so like so he thought if he tells this story, then maybe people will start resisting. But even when he escapes, even when he tells a story in like granular detail, right? People didn't believe it. People just didn't believe it because it's too crazy to think that the Germans, like, by that time in 1944 and 1945, like they didn't know about like all the death camps. Like there were kind of rumors of it, but like no, like, um, people thought that even if you told the story publicly, people wouldn't believe it, you know? But like,
Yeah.
it's just like what's happening now. Like that, at least the Nazis, they would commit experiments with these types of hormones to sterilize children. But at least what they did, they tried to conceal it. They knew what they were doing was wrong and they didn't advertise it. What's happening now, they're advertising it, right? They're taking their victims, and these people are are putting down copays to get sterilized, you know?
Yeah, it's horrific, man. But on
Yeah.
a bright note, you got to go to the State of the Union. I feel
Yeah.
this strong momentum pushing back against this gender ideology. Even in Cali, everywhere, all over. I think people are fed up. I think it's a war we're going to win, and it's going to be over in the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm curious, what was it like going to the State of the Union? What you think about Trump's executive orders and how you think sort of this gender madness mutilation is going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, the State of the Union, it was one of the most electric things, outside of getting married and then the birth of my daughter. It was one of the most remarkable things I've ever been a part of, because it was his first speech after being reelected, after the greatest political revolution, after the first American Revolution, and
After almost getting shot in the head,
yeah, yeah.
even.
And after overcoming, however many dozen indictments, all these felonies, and now he was back. The boys were back in town, and it was like
The
the
boys are
House
back in
chamber, which is
town.
yeah, the House chamber is a really big like room, right, where the House goes to vote on things. But when it's packed with people in the gallery, like on the second floor, and when it's packed on the House, it becomes very small, very small, very intimate. And no one had their phones. So like we would talk and we got there like 2 hours early. So like me and the guys next to me, we ended up talking, becoming like good friends, and we would kind of BS and like, make jokes. And it was great because we didn't have our phones. We actually had to talk to each other. But like you can see on one side where the Republicans were, there was like this kinetic energy that was emanating. It was like visible. It was like this visible energy that was coming off on the right side where I was standing of so it's Donald Trump's left side, my right side. And then on the Democrat side, it was just you know, like on the Republican side, they were like young, good looking, vibrant, happy, talking, smiling. And on the Democrat side, they were old, infirmed, bitter, resentful. They were just sitting there looking straight forward. And it was like you could see this divide, not only in like their appearance, but in like their faces, in the energy that was coming off of it.
Energy, yeah.
And then it was this powerful thing. And I think being a part of it was a privilege, as a guest of Josh Hawley. And then, but then I think the executive orders are a good first start, you know, but it's like the transgender ideology is just like any other ideology, right? Like a death cult, where the members they've have committed such grievous crimes. They're like the last imperial soldiers on Okinawa, right? Where they would
Yeah.
rather chew on a grenade rather than admit surrender. Because to admit surrender is to admit that their entire worldview is a lie, right? And that to admit that they had committed the world's greatest atrocities, right? So like for them to admit that is a very high barrier for them to overcome. I think an insurmountable barrier. So I think this is going to be longer than 5 or 10 years. I think this is going to become something that will tear apart our country. I do not think that this is something we can come back from. I think that blue states and red states are, even though Trump is elected, I don't think it's something that we can that will ever be reconcilable. I think that this is only going to get worse. I don't think this is something that ends without a major conflict.
What do you think then when you see things like the WPATH files, the CAS review, the new NIH or HHS report, these different things that come out in other countries starting to ban it, 26 or 7 states, including yours. Although I'm sure they still have probably some underground happenings of it, but yeah, I mean, don't those things inspire you though in some ways? And is
Oh
there any
yeah,
way
yeah,
to
yeah.
get through to
No,
those people that have done these atrocities or hold them accountable, perhaps legally, financially, criminally?
yeah. So possibly. I think no, it's definitely a good thing. Like, but there's going to be people who are so incriminated that they can't go any like that they rely on it. So it's like kind of when you look at like the Civil War, right? Like it's something that had been brewing for decades, right? Like in Missouri, there was a big conflict between like the Blue Jays, like where the college gets the name from, like these two kind of like conflicting groups, and it turned into an armed conflict. And it was issues over slavery, right? And but there are also states' rights issues and different things. So it's like the decades before the Civil War was a culmination of a lot of things. And what had happened was it was like you had two sides become entrenched in their beliefs. One side believed in the sanctity of human dignity, that no person can ever be enslaved to another. And then the other people believed that you couldn't slave another human being. In the 1800s, it was a physical form of slavery. And now it's also a physical form of slavery, but it's just to medications and surgery. So I think that I hope that's not the case. I really hope not. But I think that the no ideology in human history has ever been destroyed um, any other way, if you get what I'm saying, right?
I hear what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
So something serious has to happen to make sure
Yeah.
people know how serious the atrocities that
Yeah.
are happening are.
Yeah. If you think
I
about the
mean,
Imperial
what
Japanese,
about
they
like
went
after, yeah, they went hard, they wouldn't give up, they'd fight to
right,
the
the
death, every one of
Nazis,
them.
the Soviets,
But we
right?
did end up holding some Nazis accountable, right? From World War II.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a
And that's
world, we
part of
came
it, right?
together
Yeah. Yeah. But
so
and
could
think
that
about
not
that. That
happen
was
for
after
this?
45 million people died, right?
Yeah.
But it was this conflict of visions. It was a conflict of visions that seems about something like that's we would call a culture war now, right? But these culture
Yeah.
wars kind of progressed to political issues, right? Like back in the 1920s and 30s, right, for the Soviets, like these were culture war issues, but they had turned into mass scale human slaughter. That's how it
Yeah.
happens, just like the Civil War, you know?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, we're more civil now. And I
Oh,
hope
you
that,
think we're civil now?
you
We
know,
are not more civil now. You think they
you don't
thought the
think so?
Germans were civil then? Oh, not in a million years. They saw, I mean, Germany were the apex of civility, right? They had the greatest composers, the greatest scientists, but they had, no. We are not more civil now, man. We are the same tribal animals that we were back then. It just takes a
Like the
spark
Lord of the Rings
to
story.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the line between good and evil runs between in the through the heart of each individual, man. Like we
I love
are,
that quote.
it's
It's
like,
true.
but it's also it's telling because it's like the scale of human destruction is around the corner always, right? Always.
Yeah.
That's the story of human history. It's the moment we think we're too civil that we learn just how uncivil we are.
Okay. So how do you foresee this going then? And what's the best case scenario? Because I like to be optimistic. So what do you see as the best case scenario for ending this gender insanity and for us deciding that mutilating kids and, you know, transing them in any way, social or otherwise, is wrong?
I think the best case scenario is in the next 8 years, 8 to 12 years, is the federal government under the leadership of Republicans has to lay down the law, hold a few of these doctors criminally liable, and that means long prison sentences, right? It's like all you have to do is nail a few people to the wall. Everyone else will fall in line, right? You have to get the blue states under control, right? But I don't think it's possible. I think they're too
Okay.
far gone. Unfortunately, I think California is too far gone. And it's like, um, uh, it's yeah, like I'm an optimist, but like, you know, it's it, there's no indication. There's no indication that these people are capable of reconciliation.
Well, we see it like California, I live here, right? So everyone I meet, just parents at the park, anything, I don't run into anybody. I'm not exaggerating. Anyone who believes that kids should be transitioned or guys should be in girls' sports. Just
Hmm.
nobody. And it just gives me this hope. And I see how many people show up at the Capitol over the crazy gender bills and keeping secrets from parents. You know, people boycotting the guys winning the state championships right now. And it gives me this immense hope that even California is perhaps savable. Because I feel it, I see it all the time, and I just feel like Lord of the Rings, that good is going to triumph over this, no matter how dark it seems or how much power it seems like the evil side has. We're going to not give up and not surrender and fight through it, and the sun will shine again, you know?
Yeah, and I think that you're right. I think the average person, isn't for this. But just like any other time in human history, the average person doesn't matter, right? They're like we
Yeah.
are the average person is the product of waves of political ideologies and revolutions. And just like COVID, you didn't think that your next door neighbors were willing to like applaud as people died, right? Like or that they
Snitch.
got fired, right? You didn't think that
Yeah.
your neighbors would become snitches and that they would like harass people in such vicious ways. So like, you know, the line between good and evil lines goes through the heart of each person. So like the neighbors who you see today, right, who are like, oh yeah, this is crazy. Tomorrow, right, they're the ones carrying pitchforks. That's how it always is. And we've lived through it. We've been there, right? So that's something we can't forget. It's the average people who seem like okay people now, who are the armies for the totalitarians and the fascists in the future.
It's true. And don't even have the courage to just say what they believe being wrong, because that way they take hold of all the institutions, all the power, and then they become part of it. That's why people need to actually start speaking up and
Yeah.
being brave,
Yeah.
like you. And I want you to
Well,
close us
and
out.
it's like
And
it's like a full understanding of the
anything,
darkness. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly, it is. And I want you to close us out. Anything you want to say, any sort of words of wisdom, call to action, anything you want, man, to close us out here.
Yeah, I
To
would say it's the full understanding of the darkness we face, right, is the first thing to get someone to seeing the light on the future, because it's only the acceptance of that darkness that you can place your hope in the right place, which is with God, right? Because you don't place your hope in people or movements or politicians or anything, right? No matter what comes at you, right? If you believe in the right thing and you believe in a higher power, then no matter what evil you face, then that's the only way to overcome it.
yeah, you've got to believe in something greater than yourself and be brave and save the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Your story is just incredible. You inspire me. I'm so glad to be your friend and just be with you in this fight.
I appreciate it, man. It's a privilege.
Yeah.